This is The Roadmap with Lee Heisman.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to The Roadmap, exclusively here on ASBN.com. I'm Lee Heisman, and every week we bring you some of the brightest entrepreneurs, CEOs, C-level executives, and business owners who are climbing the ladder, scaling their businesses, and thinking about how one day to exit stage left. I'd love to introduce my good friend here, Marvin Willis, who is a partner at Smith & Howard, a CPA firm and an advisory firm here in town.
Welcome. Thank you.
Absolutely. Marvin, thank you so much for coming on the show. Marvin, we met a while ago and we were talking about M&A and how important it is for business owners that are considering that exit. You know, here on the roadmap, we talk about growing, scaling, and eventually exiting their business. I want to get into what you do at your firm, but you transitioned from being a CFO into this firm. What were the reasons for that?
Well, whenever I first started my career, I started out as an auditor and married, and my wife was like, you know, I didn't marry an empty house, and I was traveling all the time. So she said, why don't you go into industry? So I took my stab at industry, and I found that about every 2 or 3 years, I was becoming incredibly bored, and I needed a change. And so I continued going to a troubled company, turning them around, and finally Smith & Howard, my current firm, was my auditor, and they said, have you ever thought about coming back into public accounting? I said, that'll never happen. 23 plus years later, here I sit as a partner at Smith & Howard.
Yeah, but there's a reason why you said it would never happen, because you would think CPA firm, advisory firm, and I've, you know, for 25 years of business, not disrespecting or giving any shade to the CPA firms, which I need you guys out there. Again, inside the box, not an outside thinker, you know, could get very, very bored. But if I'm incorrect, you're third generation here now at the firm, 52 years, is that correct?
That's correct.
52 years old is the firm, but you are really the entrepreneurial arm of this firm. Is that accurate? Talk about that diversity that you bring to the firm.
Well, I think that's a good way to look at it. I mean, clearly we're out looking and helping businesses grow. And in that process, they're looking at financial needs, they're looking at HR needs, they're looking at financing needs. And so that's really what my arm of the firm does. We actually go out and help entrepreneurial people build their business.
So, you know, when someone's building their business, you're checking the boxes, right? Making sure tax returns are in line, of course. Are you doing any, you talk about that advisory part. How about the growth curve, scaling their business? Do you provide those advisory services?
We do, because if you're looking at a transaction, no matter when that transaction is, you need to build your back office. You need to build the financial reliability and accuracy of your data. And clearly entrepreneurs, for the most part, don't think about that. They're looking at the next deal, the next opportunity, and that's where we come in to try to build that back office, build the scalability to where they can focus looking out the windshield instead of looking in the rearview mirror.
Well, you know, so a lot of entrepreneurs, you know, the old adage, you don't know what you don't know. And the entrepreneurs know their industry very well, but they don't know what it takes for an exit. And usually what I've found for entrepreneurs is, you know, it's someone usually approaching them to say, I'm interested in buying your business. Usually there isn't this master plan where they say, I'm going to grow it to this certain point and then I'm going to put it in the marketplace. I see more likely it's somebody makes an offer and it kind of sparks a question in their mind. Going back to what you see with your clientele, you and I talked a while ago, when someone is doing their taxes, staying above board with the IRS, they sometimes run 2 sets of books. Can you speak to that and the importance of that?
That's correct. So a lot of times what you'll find is clients are like, well, I just have 1 set of books. I said, no, you don't. You have 2, because generally accepted accounting principles, which is what we operate by.
And you know, people reference that all the time. And for people out there that don't know, when you hear GAAP accounting, just, you know, that's a very popular term that as entrepreneurs or non-accountants, we've heard about GAAP accounting. That's what you mean by that. Is that correct?
That is correct. It's a set of standards that we have to go by in financial reporting, and it brings consistency, reliability, and comparability between industries, states, municipalities. So really what we're asking for our business owners to do is let's think about a transaction before a transaction occurs.
That's brilliant, actually. So you're having the foresight and you're not in reactive mode.
That is correct. I wish all of my clients would look 3 to 5 years out to say, hey, I'm looking at a transaction, let's get our house in order. Instead, typically what I get is, I've got an LOI in hand, what do I do?
I've got an LOI, that's a letter of intent. So I have someone interested in my business. What do I do to go back 3, 4, 5 years and start reverse engineering this, correct?
That's exactly right.
So talk about, when I say 2 sets of books, this is absolutely not that this is not illegal activity at all. Having two sets of book is very, very accurate. You talk about your GAAP principles, general accounting principles, which you're doing for the IRS, but then talk about that second set in terms of your expertise for people that say, I may want to exit in the future, showing their true profits.
That's right. So many of our business owners run some personal expenses through the business. They just do. They always have. And so first thing we do is we look at, let's look at the financials and make sure that we normalize those. And that would be taking any of those type transactions out. It would also be looking at comp. If they're taking a small salary, but their job responsibilities exceed that, we have to make an adjustment for that. That's another normalizing entry. But typically what we do is we get this prepared to where your existing owner or potential buyer coming in now has great financial history, usually 24 months, and then a trailing 12 months, TTM. And we're looking there at what a normalized business operation would look like. And then that's typically where, if they're going to sell, there will be a multiple applied to that normalized earning level.
So, you mentioned TTM, which is and another important thing for business owners to understand is, usually 90% plus or calendar year with their accounting, I'm guessing, or even more. That's a January to a December 31st. And some people say, well, my books might not look great in December because I have a slightly seasonal business and maybe it gets better in March. Can you lean into and talk a little about the value of, sometimes we don't look at, to sell a business, the calendar year. Sometimes we look at the TTM, the trailing 12 months.
That's exactly right. Now, one of the components of any type of a due diligence engagement will look at seasonality. And clearly, we'll also look at profitability by client, profitability by SKU, which would be inventory. But typically what we'll do is we'll go in and we'll say, and this really became an issue when we went through the pandemic. When we came out of the pandemic, it was, all right, what is the new normal? And so that's where the trailing 12 really got more legs under it. And so us looking at that and being able to identify it and create some synergies there give value to the potential seller.
So, your experience, again, the firm being 52 years old, you being there, was it 26 you said?
23.
23 years, pardon me. You being there 23 years and going through all of this for your clients over the years, I'm sure you have, I'm going to use the word x-ray vision. Your crystal ball is pretty good, but that's what people come to you for, is you can avoid the landmines before they do it. So the proactivity is really important, getting their books prepared, normalizing set of books, and a regular GAAP accounting prepared set of books. What are some of the other pieces of advice for our viewers out there that if they're thinking of maybe this might be the time, or 2 years from now or 3 years from now, what are some things that you've seen some owners make mistakes with, or even you, Marvin, nobody's perfect, make mistakes with?
Well, I wish we were perfect. But one of the things that I find, at least for owners, is let's at least entertain the conversation. That's the first thing. Second thing is, what really is the value that you need to get from a transaction? I've got several owners that have gone through 2 or 3 LOIs before we actually sat down and said, okay, with all of your personal lifestyle running through the company, if we were to take that out, that would go away with the sale of the company. What really is that after-tax number that you need? And then let's start working toward, okay, now let's value the business. Let's clean up the books. Let's get the true cash flow value. And then let's see, do those two align? And then start the process of getting your financial house in order and making sure, if you have key employees, you have employment agreements, all the things that add value to a business that most owners don't think about.
It's funny, I work with so many owners through their transactions, and people that do very well in their businesses, and they're so used to running some form of some personal expenses through. I mean, maybe they don't need the Delta Club at the Brave Stadium, but they have that. So it's still a business expense, and it's valid nonetheless. But I can see a lot of owners sometimes get very fearful of having to come out of their own pocket after post-transaction. Go back to some of the clients that you'd help transition into an exit. What are some of the mistakes that you've seen them make that you've had to really work on cleaning up?
Well, I think first of all, again, just not preparing. Just not understanding that the value that will come with a due diligence engagement, which is what occurs after we sign that letter of intent. There's usually a 30 to 60 day period where the buyer can come in and look at the financial records, the legal, all the components of buying and selling a business, and really just not taking the time to get prepared to document the numbers, to document any normalized add backs in advance. That saves a tremendous amount of time and dollars for the potential buyer coming in, because they can leverage off of that. So it's not like they're paying for that same activity twice.
So have you seen deals fall apart because of this?
Absolutely.
So yeah, this is the landmines I'm looking for. So someone has a great deal, they get an LOI, which is a letter of intent. It is not legally binding, but it's a direction and a framework for which the deal to be structured on. Because of this lack of preparation and not using a service like yours or using that type of consulting services, how many deals, what percentage would you say have fallen apart because of the lack of foresight?
Well, several, I would say, have fallen apart. Several have had to go back to the negotiation tables. So, one of the areas we see consistently is related to sales and use tax and companies not understanding it. There are so many municipalities, there's so many different rules that they just haven't complied. We had a deal, I guess 2 years ago, that was significant. It was a telecom company that my client was trying to buy. We found an undocumented liability of around $18 million on a $20 million deal.
Oh, was this a sales and use tax issue?
It was exactly that.
Oh
yes.
my gosh! And I'm going to look at the audience out there real quick and point a finger at them. You've heard about about student loans. Those things don't go away if you have a financial burden or you claim a bankruptcy. They don't go away. And sales and use tax, you're personally guaranteed for that. Am I correct?
That's exactly right. It trails the transaction.
It trails a transaction. You are absolutely guaranteed for your sales and use tax, any personal loans that you have. So in that kind of situation, and you were representing the buyer at that time, that's
correct.
A big warning flag. Is there anything else for other sellers that are out there that say, let me make sure my sales and use tax is up to snuff. Let me make sure all my contracts are in place. Obviously, any recurring revenue is of more value because you represent both sides. Is there anything else that you would throw out there as a big red warning flag?
Again, I think just making sure that you have your payroll in order, that if you have 1099 employees, make sure that they are truly independent contractors. So there are a lot of different areas, again, I think you could focus on.
Do you know the rules and regulations? That's an important one. And I don't want to get too much down the labor road, but there's a lot of employers that dance that line where someone really, should they be a W-2? Are they truly a 1099? Any advice for sellers or business owners out there that are thinking of selling, of crossing their T's and dotting their I's? What are those regulations for the employment law and what are they allowed to do where someone crosses that 1099 to W-2?
Well, I think it's the whole point of if really you're controlling their actions, they're an employee. They're not a 1099. And so just being careful of that, look at that in advance. Again, whatever's been done wrong, we have time to correct it. We have time to address it before a buyer comes in and uses that as a negotiating tool when we're going through a transaction.
Well, I'm going to interrupt you and have to say, you don't have time if they're handing you an LOI saying, hey, Marvin, help us. What do we do right now?
You
Correct?
do not. You do not. That's firefighting.
All right, fair. I like that. So Marvin, listen, time flies when you're having fun. There's no question this went by like that, but the information and knowledge you have is extraordinary. If people want to get in touch with you, if they want to use you and your firm for not only the CPA services, but the advisory services, and they're all thinking, hey, I need to prepare for an exit. Even if it's 2, 3, 4 years down the road, I want to utilize your services. How do they get in touch with you?
Well, they can actually go to the website, which is smith-howard.com, and that will have all our contact information on there. And my name and reference will be on there as a partner with the firm.
Well, every time I spend time with you, I learn something new. And I love your vantage point, and I know that our firm is going to be using your firm very soon for a number of deals that we have in play. And I can't thank you enough, Marvin, for coming out on the show today.
Thanks for giving me the opportunity.
Absolutely. Everyone, thank you so much for joining us today. I hope the show was insightful. I know that it was for me. And we hope to see you again next week on another episode of The Roadmap.
Thanks for watching The Roadmap with Lee Heisman.